So, in terms of Bitcoin hitting its all-time high this year, I would say prior to the coronavirus, all of us were pretty optimistic that Bitcoin would hit the all-time high this year. But with recent events, doesn't matter how bullish you are, I think you really have to be cautious with whatever prediction or projections you had. Because yes, we had the BTC halving, but if we're going into a global recession and if we're going into stagflation, I think, as I mentioned this before, the right events have to happen at the right time for all of this to occur. I think for Bitcoin to hit its all-time high this year, two things have to happen, right? Because I mentioned this before. Bitcoin, BTC is a hedge versus currency risk and a hedge versus political risk. So currency risk being that inflation. So for inflation to rise, the purchasing power for people, for the average person, has to decrease. And that happens through inflation. So with the way quantitative easing is going here in America, that seems like it's going to happen. But it's very tough to predict when exactly it's going to happen and when exactly it's going to be felt. Because we all know and we all believe it's going to happen. But lots of people like Peter Schiff and others have been saying this for the last 10 years. And the central banks, the Fed here in America, have been propping up equities markets by printing more and more money. That's why we had a 12-year bull run, the longest bull run in history, because the average bull run lasts 5 or 6 years. And we went 12 years without really having a bear market. So who knows? Maybe they keep on printing money and giving out helicopter money and keep on propping up capital markets, and this thing keeps on going. But I think eventually the dollar and fiat currencies will end up crashing. And I think when that happens, then BTC is well primed and positioned to do well. But I think you also have to add in the other element, right? The other political risk. You have to have governments really start either confiscating people's money, or we have basically people have to have something scare them so that they can flee to Bitcoin as a hedge. In China, lots of people were fleeing the Chinese yuan or renminbi to BTC as a hedge because they wanted to get the money out of China. Or, for example, what happened in Cyprus back in 2008 when the Cyprus government went and taxed all their people and took money from their bank account. So it's tough to say. I think we also have to factor in that here in America, we have the general election coming up in November. And I think that's really a very uncertain time. So lots of institutional investors might not really know how to play it. So they might wait to see what happens. So for instance, if the Democrats or a socialist ends up coming into power, I mean, then, and they want to do like huge taxes, that's political risk. That's something that will get lots of people to want to hedge and flee to Bitcoin. So I think those two events have to happen, and it's very tough to say whether they will happen this year. So I mean, honestly speaking, in my humble opinion, I don't think BTC goes to an all-time high this year. I mean, unless everything happens like 100 miles an hour where the dollar just crashes, boom, then maybe, right? But I think it's going to take a while for things to play out, because just looking into what's happening with Corona, right, and how that's affecting the economy. So obviously we're now in a bear market in equities, but things are going to get worse before they get better. That part we know. But companies haven't really began reporting earnings, and earnings will start trickling in end of this quarter, end of Q1, end of Q2. So by June, July, and all these travel industry companies, the airlines, the hotel chains, the restaurants, even supply chain, all these companies, once they start reporting bad earnings, then equities are going to drop even more, in my opinion. And when that happens, because crypto is not right now, all the institutions need liquidity. So kind of what happened before in the last few weeks. It didn't matter how BTC was being uncorrelated to equities. When equities tanked, everything tanked because people had to sell for cash. So if the same thing is going to happen again, once these companies start reporting earnings, if they're just selling to take profits to go to cash and they just want liquidity, it's tough to see how Bitcoin and crypto doesn't get affected in that time, right? So the fact that equities are going to go lower makes me think Bitcoin is going to go lower. And earlier in the show, we talked about how we think it can drop to 3,000 and Ethereum can go even lower. So if that happens, and then you also have the uncertainty of the election, people are probably not going to want to be on the sidelines because they might not know how to hedge, whether to be in fiat or to be in crypto. So those two events, I think, to me really screams that people will go for the wait and see approach as opposed to let me go all in or let me pick a particular side. I think the wait and see approach, the cautious approach, is what's going to be the norm. And because of that, I think it's basically unpredictable. So Bitcoin going to all-time high, going to 20,000 USD. It's unlikely, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't complain if BTC went there, but to say it's gonna happen before the end of the year is tough. I mean, but with the election in November and December happening, right? Let's say something crazy happens and Bernie Sanders wins. Oh, BTC to 20,000, I think. I mean, because he wants to tax the 1%. He wants to tax. I mean, I don't even know his tax bracket. Maybe like 50%, 70%. He wants to tax Wall Street with high frequency trading. So all these things, all right, that's political risk right there. And inflation is happening. Stagflation is going to happen with over 3 million jobless claims this month, and we think those numbers will keep on growing. And unemployment may hit 20%, which is pretty insane. So taking in all those things, I mean, long term, very bullish on Bitcoin and crypto, but right, to kind of, I guess, play the other side, Bitcoin and crypto has to do well this year. So even though I just said it's tough, because lots of events have to happen almost in sequence, crypto and Bitcoin has to do well this year. Otherwise, why are we even here? I mean, and this is somebody who has the Moon Lambo posters up here. I mean, if Bitcoin doesn't do well this year, why are we even here? I mean, because it's meant to be the hedge against inflation, against all this. So it's tough. But I mean, long story short, I think all those events, right, the currency risk, the political risk, have to happen. Not quite sure if they're going to happen all this year at the same time. But if you told me, okay, maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, will all these events happen? I would say probably going to happen, in my opinion. So probably Bitcoin will hit its all-time high by the end of the year. I'm curious to see what people think. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think BTC is going to hit its all-time high this year? Let me know in the comments down below.